Welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. We'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B growth guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne. Today, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Greg Davis. Greg is the CEO of Bigleaf Networks. He has over 25 years of experience scaling tech businesses past the $100 million revenue mark, driving strategic acquisitions, and leading Bigleaf Networks in a competitive SaaS and SD-WAN market. He has fantastic actionable insights on scaling B2B SaaS companies with a focus on sustainable long-term growth, leadership strategies for CEOs, navigating product market fit and expansion, and the challenges and solutions of building predictable revenue in tech and technology-enabled companies. So Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Great to be here. I love this topic. Love the format of the show. So
Cool.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So you've obviously, got a lot of experience and done a lot of things. Before we dive into some of these specific topics, why don't you kind of tell us your story? How did you get from there to here?
One step at a time.
That's right.
So I grew up, my family had a business. I grew up with an operations background. And so for from the time I could walk until, the year 2000, I was headed into a kitchen to be a chef to work in family restaurant businesses. And that was my thing. And that's like my father's father, and this had gone on for years. And what the restaurant business did for me, and what that situation did for me, is it gave me a lot of responsibility because my dad owned the place, if you will. It gave me a lot of responsibility early, and it taught me things about operational discipline. And so for the first, from high school, which would have been, say, 1983, 84, all the way to 2000, that's what I was focused on, being the best I could be at running a restaurant. And if you know anything about running a restaurant, it's the operational discipline element of that. So it's a very particular business, and there's a big difference for a server showing up at 11 versus 10 minutes after 11. So, through that, and it's a tough business, and it's a bit of a dangerous business at times.
Sure.
In 1999, I made the decision to move out of the industry and into sales. It was a bit of a long story, and I'll give you the short version, but I found myself in a highly competitive sales process, in a community that I thought everyone loved me in. And it was I was trying to take my catering business and get an institutional contract for skyboxes in SEC stadiums.
Okay.
I was just a young punk, if you will.
Well, you're an LSU grad, right?
That's correct. And LSU was building skyboxes, and I had a catering business. And I was like, well, if somebody's going to do, and all my customers were going to this or buying the skyboxes.
Right.
My customers were the wealthy crowd in Baton Rouge. And I had friends that had catering businesses, and you had institutional players, and LSU had a board. And all of a sudden, I find myself in a highly competitive situation against Aramark, against a lot of other big competitors, and people that were, smiling in front of me were working behind the scenes to make damn sure that I didn't win. And I loved everything about it. And my brother and I made a couple of judo moves, and we won. And to this day, that catering business, so all of the LSU skyboxes for the stadium and the baseball stadium are all run through my brother's catering business. And you can imagine this is a huge operation.
Sure.
And so I was hooked, and I had the opportunity to get into technology sales, an industry and a business that I loved, and it was kind of an extension of my personality. And I got into individual contributor tech sales, focused in networking and wide area network connectivity. And I didn't know anything However, I had kind of figured out through the sales process that, or through this competitive thing, that it is a process,
Yeah.
and the skills that I had developed over my years running a restaurant and being an operator, could be applied to these kind of things at scales. And my first instinct was, I'm going to go sell big catering jobs, and then I realized there's
Uh-huh.
a lot of money in that, and that's what got me into tech. So
Sure.
I I um I basically applied the skills that I'd learned in the business, coupled with some advice that I didn't know at the time what were some folks that were uh, highly respected and very good salespeople sort of nationally. One guy
Uh-huh.
was Don Briggs, and the other one was my brother. He was a big wig at Cisco Systems early on, and so I was getting some pretty good advice. And so I moved to Houston, and that led me into the world of PE-backed software and
Okay.
executive management, which is where I am today. And so the practice, and really I sort of cut my teeth and started with that at a business called Vericenter, which was a managed hosting business. And what I quickly, learned both about the operations of a software business or a services business is, there is some sort of kitchen, there is some sort of expedite point, there is some
Uh-huh.
sort of customer acquisition scenario, there's upselling, there's attention to detail, there's communication and how all this works. And so when I began to apply that same logic to a managed hosting company, tickets come in, people need all days. How many Windows tickets
Right.
do we have open?
Right.
Those kinds of things. So I started applying, rather than sort of have this new career, I sort of blended them together, and that worked. That worked very well for me. And essentially that's what I'm doing today. So over the years, along with a long list of people that are, probably too long to mention, I've scaled and managed three businesses and about 1.6, 1.7 billion in transaction value since
Wow.
since 2000.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah,
So,
and I'm fortunate. I've had some great people around me, and I've had a lot of opportunity, and I try to pay that back. I try One of the things I try to do when I go into business is find the people, where I was back in 2000, and give them the opportunity, people that are probably smarter than they realize, and giving them the opportunity to, some of the opportunities that I have, which is to take practical experience and apply it to something that's maybe, sort of beyond your skill set a bit.
yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of what I've done over the last 20 years. In all cases, kind of regardless of what my role has been in these businesses, and I've run sales. I was a VP of sales. I was an EVP of sales. I ran a sales and marketing function. I was the chief operations officer for a business. I'm the CEO. And so and in all cases, I've been, kind of board level and at the executive level. And again, that's, guys like Gray Hall and Dave Colsanthi, who's still on the board of directors for my business today, gave me that opportunity, and then I did with it the best that I could. In all these businesses, regardless of what my role has been, my focus has really been, as I said, on the customer acquisition and customer retention side. Uh,
Yeah.
and as I was telling you earlier, I'm fascinated by the changing nature of the head of sales role.
Yeah.
I think about, when I got started, the VP of sales was king. That was the role, and it was all relationship based. It was dominated by field software. Trust was a function of how much time you spent, things like dinners and golf outings, and it was relationships were the differentiator. And then, and that was sort of where we were until about '05, when um, the emergence of CRM and things started to change. By the way,
Yeah.
Joe Ferrara, Goldmine. I'm listening to that podcast going, oh, this is awesome. I too was a Goldmine user. Uh,
That's right. Yeah. I remember.
and then, and then sometime around, as I was telling you earlier, sometime around '05, '06, '07, you begin to saw the emergence of the CRO role. And I think I picked on that role for years. I think it was a mechanism that private equity used to not get sideways with the founders of businesses, but to demote their VP of sales, their buddy that they grew up with. And so they create this role, and they go out and they hire people that were really good sellers, and they're going to give them marketing and sales, and we're going to have a single revenue stream. And then they harness them with operational churn. And you're like, wait, what? Explain this to me. And so I have beat on that role forever. I think it's a passive move to not make tough decisions, and then it's generally speaking ends up being watered down. Now that changed over the years, but that's certainly the way that the way that it started.
So,
Um,
so let's push on that a little bit.
yeah, sure.
So as someone that, you know, I'm personally very much invested in the belief that marketing without good sales is, sort of marketing for marketing's sake. Sales that isn't feeding back into marketing isn't getting sort of the best that they can get out of it. When those two departments are siloed from each other or set up in an antagonistic way, it's not sort of the best outcome. And then to sort of add to that, you really get that exponential curve of revenue growth from retention and expansion revenue, which isn't possible without sort of the customer success function being integrated with marketing and sales so that you're attracting the right customers that actually have the potential to stay with you and stay a long time. So, from a philosophical standpoint, having all three of those revenue impacting departments rolling up under one leader creates potentially more alignment and more integration across those systems. Talk to me a little bit about why you think that's not the right way to
Look,
go.
Blake Saleh at Proof Point is a freak of nature.
Okay.
There's 10 or 15 of those in the country. There's just not a lot of folks that are going to be really not that I've seen, and certainly not in the realm of $20 million to $50 million software.
Yeah.
When you start talking about and Blake's at Proof Point, he's an awesome guy. There's others. When you start talking about that kind of scale, that's different than where I am, Mark. What I'm talking about is in your 20 to 100 million growth PE stage, the chance that you're going to pull a resource in that is from the outside through a retained search that isn't one or the other,
Yeah.
either a customer success guru
They
or
come
a
from a
revenue
certain
person.
background and have that
Yeah,
expertise,
and
but not the full breadth.
that's exactly right. I think the role, the concept that you said, this is the vertically integrating the revenue model.
Yeah.
I'm all in on that. It's I think the two people that are mainly responsible for that are in the way that I think about things in the world that I am are the CEO and the chief marketing officer. And so I would tell you that my emphasis, and I came out of sales. I've lived in these sort of sales versus marketing roles.
Sure.
I've spent the
Sure.
last
Sure.
15 years breaking down those. But over the course of that, as the market has changed and as the buying habits have changed and as the tooling has changed, and we've sort of moved into this platform world, then I think I think the things that you talk about, which is a lot of the product-led selling and getting into churn manage or retention, upsells, new products. I think it's more product marketing and more marketing related than it is than what you would burden with your your new customer acquisition team.
Interesting.
Again, I'm operating in a smaller segment of the market than
Sure.
enterprise. I run a business that's in the $30 million range, and so we don't in a tight credit market. In these, a lot of these businesses are break even, slightly positive. I can't afford to go find a jack of all trades that's highly experienced at running a customer success function that understands contract lifecycle management tools, the stacks that support customer success and sales and marketing. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You might find it in a sales operator,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's not really the tip of the spear for your customer acquisition. So I think I'll give you the punchline for where my head is. I think it's the shortest, fastest path into the contemporary chief revenue officer runs through the marketing team. That's my position. And so
Interesting.
you could make the case that this entire podcast is designed for me to persuade Lori Stout to take the chief revenue officer role at Bigleaf at some point in time. Don't tell her that.
Well, if she has a
Uh,
Google alert set for her name, it's
exactly.
bound to
Well,
pop
and
up.
I can sort of back that up. We can get into that a little bit later, maybe in the conversation. But I think that go back to this concept of platform. I think this is the skills have changed. You just think about, we talk about the transfer of the transfer of enthusiasm.
Right.
The
Old
the
school.
yeah, and I think in the world that we live in today, in the platform driven world, the CRO becomes an architect of delivering trust and
That's
an
right.
architect of delivering these things. It's about building gravity more so than it is about pushing deals. And so, and that's more of a marketing skill set.
I tend to agree with that. I'm curious, you talked about, this vertical integration of marketing, sales, customer success, all the revenue. I call it the revenue team or revenue processes that in your mind that lives between the marketing officer and the CEO. I'm curious which of the sort of elements of that fit with under the CEO's sort of ownership in your mind.
Yeah, so I probably didn't word that correctly. I think
Okay.
maybe what I was trying to say is it's between the CEO and the leader of revenue. And I
Okay.
think the leader of revenue in the world that I live in is more likely the marketer. If you had to
More
pick
like
two
a
between
product
the
marketing.
sales
Yeah.
and the marketer, I would lean on the marketer. So the way that we run, um, but cautious not to drag the marketer into operational churn either.
Sure. Sure.
So the bit, I believe that we're in a transition.
Okay.
You think about the things that we are automating around at the top of the funnel, the BDR functions and those kind of things. So we're in a technology transition. So I think the in some cases the organizational structure, at least on my case, may be in somewhat of an evolutionary period as well. But the way that I run things today is I have the customer success function reports directly into me, the marketer reports directly into me, and sales reports directly into me. If I establish a single person, we got larger. I like being hands-on. I'm sort of elbows deep in this transition. As we
Yeah.
get larger, then I probably would evolve that into putting the hiring, VP of marketing, putting the chief marketing officer on top, and then and building the organization that way. And I don't think
Interesting.
the sales leader would disagree with any of that.
Yeah. So not to ask you to reveal too much, but in your current structure, how much did that, so you've got the marketing, sales, and customer success, recurring retention revenue, and expansion revenue, all reporting to the CEO. How much do they collaborate, engage with each other across those lines versus the CEO, you as the CEO being the conduit for insights from one to the other?
Yeah, I'm generally never the conduit.
Okay.
I try not to ever get myself in that situation. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so a little bit tactical. We meet weekly, and we
As a
include
team, as a
product.
combined revenue team?
Yep, and we just call it, we add product to it and call it commercial.
Yep.
So it's a commercial function, and then that there's two of those sessions are about deals, if you will.
Yeah.
And
Fine.
a deal could be a stuck transaction and a renewal, something gnarly or something juicy and good. And then the alternating weeks, then the other weeks we do win-loss review and pricing. And that's kind of our pricing committee. And so that
Yeah.
group, we met today, as a matter of fact, that group meets on a weekly basis. And what I'm trying to do is to keep gum off of their shoe, if you will, in the form of I don't want anyone getting bogged down in operational issues as it relates to our existing customer base. We have phenomenally low churn here, so that I want to keep that gum off, if you will.
Yeah.
But mainly, what I'm trying to do is draw a tight alignment and connectivity between product and marketing and sales, obviously,
Yeah.
just like I have my whole life and everyone else.
Well, and I see when companies do it right, which certainly sounds like you're doing it right, it becomes such a strategic sort of nexus of information because you've got customer success serving as the voice of the actual customer, marketing, serving as the voice of where the market is heading, sales giving you that frontline heartbeat as to what's actually working, which then guides, the strategic direction of the company, where you are building, new features that deliver specific benefits as to, well, are we doing it for this, segment of the marketplace that is, going this direction, and are we forsaking any segment of our current customer base, and how is this actually hitting the ground in sort of the activation across the sales? And so, when done right, that this revenue commercial function, as you call it, can be such a strategic insight. But so oftentimes I see companies that they either, it's all between the ears of the CEO, and they do a lot of navel gazing about what do I think the market wants, and then they build that, and then convince marketing to go create demand for a thing that they built instead of providing feedback on where the demand is, convince sales to talk them into it, and then customer success to, cover a multitude of sins of deals that have been sold that could never be fulfilled.
Yeah. We don't, our product is very easy to install. So we don't really have a backlog and that kind of thing. Most of our customer success activity is service ads
Yeah,
or potentially downgrades or, those kinds of things.
yeah,
What we're trying to do, and my sales leader is a guy named Tam Vu. Lori Stout runs marketing, and we're a pretty tight group. What we're trying to do is get ourselves in position to accommodate the world today, if you will. So we're not this concept that we're managing the funnel. That there's fracture in the funnel. People are coming and going. The buyers are leading the process. So what we're trying to build, and again, this really isn't a traditional sales thing. Where we are is these buyers are out there. We cannot, again, we need to transfer enthusiasm. We want to transfer trust, and we
yeah.
want to transfer our value proposition. Very easy to do in hand-to-hand combat sales, but that's not available. That neither the customers want that, nor do we have the ability to do that or the form to do that. So that's
That's
highly
right.
fragmented. So what we need, marketing, is we need optics into where people are as they self-service and they go through the buyer's journey. And then we need to be in position, the contemporary CRO, to understand when to jump in and save that buyer and when to shut the hell up and stay out of it.
And
And
let them go through their own process. Yeah.
and so when I say that the role has changed, that's not I've always looked for sort of, I call it pin your ears back, tighten your belt, blood and guts salespeople, like drive, drive, drive. And that's not the world that we're living in. That's not what this is. And so when we think about, who's really good at, managing to orchestration, who's really good at, you think about podcast. This is a great way for you and I to get to know one another. And it's also a way for people to assess our credibility, if you
Right.
will.
That's right.
And that's not a traditional sales thing. I suspect you have a marketing background.
Yeah. That's
And
right. Yeah.
and again, so all this just kind of keeps reinforcing we're moving, the buyer's changed, the concept has changed, and so the role needs to evolve as well. And I say the role, I use the CRO. It's the head, it's the person responsible for driving revenue inside the business.
Right. Right.
And so, to a large degree, Mark, I'm trying to figure this out myself.
Yeah.
I don't, sort of naturally think like a growth marketer. I think like a growth seller.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
I service demand probably more so, just sort of at the core, I service demand more so than I create it. And speaking of me as sort of a legacy CRO type, if you will. And so
Sure.
I'm looking at, okay, that. I just don't think that's where we get the juice in the 2025 market. And there's another thing. That's again, I told you I was fascinated by the topic, and I am.
So I want to shift gears a little bit, but it actually very much aligns with this in that, you have a unique perspective of you've helped multiple companies get to, 100 million, but some of the top 1% of all companies. And so you've seen the sort of the revenue roadblocks that companies encounter on this path from, 5 million a year to 20 million a year. And working with private equity that's very much focused on breaking through those revenue roadblocks. I and then I'm also curious because we've tapped on this, so I'm blending a few different threads together here, that we're at an inflection point where things are changing. And so I'm curious from your perspective of what has worked historically as companies try to break through some of those regular, you know, to be expected roadblocks from that 5 to 20 path. And where do you see that changing, as we go forward in a new world where, it's not plowing the street with your face, salespeople that make the difference. It's the orchestrators, it's the operations that bring these things together. Talk to me a little bit about your perspective there.
Well, I think the resourcing of today's kind of sales process is pretty thin. In other words, finding so what do we need? We need a creative resource that's more than operational. We need somebody that can create content, somebody that can educate people and convert them. We need
Yeah,
someone that understands GTM, but we also need someone that kind of understands the human psychology and narrative flow and those sorts of things.
that's
Um,
right.
we need someone that's comfortable kind of working cross function that can handle, sort of live moments with automation. And that's kind of, we talked about the agentic AI versus the podcast. So we're
Right.
doing the same thing: enthusiasm, value, and trust. Just the sequence of events and how we do that is different. So you got, interviews, panel talks,
Mhm.
whatever it is. And so it's this, we are preconditioned to go out, in particular when our backs against the wall. And a lot of people's backs have been against the wall. I mean, you go back to from 2022, 23, 2023 to today in the world of, small to medium size PE-backed software businesses, it's been
Or
hairy, right?
yeah.
And so,
The end of free money. Like, yeah, growth at all costs went out the
well,
window.
and free value too. You rub
That's
two
right. Yeah.
nickels together, and people are getting, it's like, come on. So you have these people, you have people like me, if you will, that have this high appetite for growth, and things might be thin, and so their natural tendency is, I need a hard-nosed closer.
Right.
And so I think, back to the point, the struggle is going to be patience. The patience to understand and educate yourself on what's the motion today, what's the resourcing required to put ourselves in the best position to accommodate today's buyer, and then developing. In some cases, you can hire that talent. I mentioned before, these resources are thin, but mainly one needs to develop that talent. And
Yeah.
so, what's your starting point for development? I think development under the marketing organization, depending on what your culture is, but developing under the marketer or marketing organization is a much smoother process. Uh,
Interesting.
Today, I would 10 years ago, Greg would punch 2025 Greg in the face for saying that, but I think it's true. I think it's very much true. So I think that's sort of an internal struggle,
Yeah.
that I think folks, that businesses like us are going to have to sort out. It's coupled with incredible leverage for those that understand how to harness the tools and the capability of the modern marketing and sales organization. Um, you know, you have to be very careful about where you place your bets for resource reasons. But do your homework and place those bets. Hire folks like you to come in and help you kind of get things sort of in a tight pattern, because again, the calorie burn today better provide yield,
That's
or
right.
it's just money's tight. And so,
That's
and I
right.
do that. And look, I tap into to some degree, I think I know everything. I tap into the consulting world all the time, and I'm doing it
Yeah.
right now, even when money's tight.
Well, and it's interesting though, like even, as you're describing it, the I think that there's a whole generation of marketers and salespeople that sort of chased the next thing for a while and had a lot of success, but never really had to think through a strategic lens, or even a lens of building process and systems. And I think that's one of those inflection points that we're at right now is you have to be able to bring a lens of systems thinking in order to orchestrate and do all those things and figure out how to leverage the technology. But if you're not strategic about, you know, the psychology that's involved in the process of decision making that your customer is going through and really knowing their inner monologue so that you can impact that in meaningful ways, which is fundamental to sort of marketing strategy, that positioning, then all of the knowledge of software in the world and tactics isn't that valuable. You have to, it's that synthesis of all of those things that really becomes valuable in today's landscape.
Yeah, and you need to broaden the aperture, if you will, back to the lens thing. Broaden the aperture and sort of hop out of the box a bit. So I think this is fascinating, blows my mind. And we have a portfolio company inside of UpData, which is the PE firm that it's our lead investor, and these are folks this is the second deal that I've done with UpData. We have folks inside the portfolio that are driving revenue through platforms like Reddit or Quora,
Right.
where
Right.
people are jabberjawing about this, that, or the other thing, and you have some folks in Timbuktu that are going in and saying, "Hey, have you thought about Bigleaf Networks?"
That's
And
right.
and that's for me, that's so out of the box thinking to anything that I've done over the years, and that's what I think so fascinating about today's world.
Right.
It's
Well, but again, it all comes from a strategic lens of who is our customer, what do they care about? So now and then we can understand where they live once we know them, and then we can know what to say to them once we know what they care about, and then it's tactical execution,
Yep.
which
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that kind of ties into what you were asking around product market fit, if you will,
that's right. Yeah.
on for PE firms. So I think and the I have a lot of friends that are in private equity and that I've worked with over the years, and so I don't want to diss on the group. I love these guys, and I think what they do is amazing for businesses, in particular, these growth capital companies
Sure.
allow people to go on and create tens of millions of dollars in wealth and take businesses exponentially beyond anything that they could have ever dreamed of. Now, the entrepreneur may not be the, Yertle the turtle for the whole time. A lot of that
Totally.
time that
That's right.
changes. But from a company perspective, these folks do amazing things. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world when it comes to the PE sponsors that I work with today. I've worked with a bunch. But there's a lot of mistakes that are made in that world. And one is, it's all about growth. One of the reasons I appreciate the private equity world is that the rules aren't complicated. We're working toward a transparent set of goals, and that never changes. We're
Right.
in the world of value creation, which is a combination of a lot of things, but in most cases, and certainly where I come in, I'm not an innovator and I'm not a founder. I'm an operator, if you will. And so what I
Yeah.
come in, we need to scale, and we need to produce cash and kind of run the business. So when I think about what's required to do that, well, product market fit. We need
Sure.
something that's repeatable, we need something that's scalable, and we need something that's predictable.
Right.
And that's it. And so I think that notion, when a PE firm comes into a deal, but a lot of times when I'm coming into the business, it's the PE firm's been in it for a couple of years. So,
Hmm.
but at day one, it's that needs to get established, and they have the ability to do that, and a lot of the companies that they purchase don't necessarily have the ability. So
Right.
getting that set and working with these businesses to do that, I think that's an area where most folks punch below their weight in that category. The other thing, and this frustrates me, and I've talked about this for years, so we're going through, think about what's underfoot today. So years ago, we're going to use Marketo, or we're going to use HubSpot, or we're going to do this, that, or the other. Well, I don't know. Some are using this, some are using that. We're going to use, heaven forbid, NetSuite CRM versus Salesforce versus this, that, or the other.
Sure.
And there's all of these intellectual cycles and buying patterns and cost and maintenance that goes into building these tech stacks, 80% of which have the same functionality across the businesses over and over and over again. So, what I've been sort of screaming from the top of the whatever is, well, why does everyone need to reinvent the wheel? Why do we need to go through this? Talk about repeatable and scalable. Why don't we pick a platform and make that make sense. And I think there's lots of opportunities out there for, for that. I think there's certainly plenty of tools.
Yeah.
And they're trying to strike the right balance. PE firms don't want to go in and start telling folks, how to run their business and what to do and what tools to use and those kinds of things. But they should. They have all the
Yeah.
information.
Well, and that's, so often we sort of see that you just sort of bring the playbook of here's the way to do it instead of, well, how are you doing it today? Like you can get into analysis paralysis of is
Yeah,
it this or is it that? Well, they're all fundamentally the same. So let's just make a choice and move on.
that's right. And then when you get into the PE folks that with highly starched underwear, like Toma Bravo and some of those other folks, they get Vista, they get all of that sorted out.
Yeah, that's right.
But in the on the mid-market growth capital side, folks are freestyling, and that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Well,
the opposite.
Greg, you are a wealth of knowledge, and we're obviously both passionate about a lot of these topics, so we could talk all day, but I got to be mindful of your time.
Well,
But before I let you go, why don't you tell us something that's on the horizon for you that you're excited about, either for Big Leaf or for you personally? What's something that coming around the bend?
so plenty to be excited about personally. My wife and I just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary, which is
Congratulations.
is kind of cool and freaky, if you will. Like I'm getting older, so empty nest. So I personally, things for me probably have never been any better. The professionally, I have fallen in love with this business. I was in POS and payments. It was a deal I did before this called Hunger Rush that we sold to Corsair Capital in
Uh-huh.
2022. And my customers were highly distributed businesses, lots and lots of locations, like Hungry Howie's. Where are you? Where are you located, Mark?
I'm in LA.
Okay. I forget who our pizza folks were in LA, but I had to learn how to work with cauliflower crust,
Sure,
which is a long word. So anyway, when I was doing those, and the market started to move to online ordering, so I got in a payments and online ordering deal right before the pandemic. So
Oh, good
the
timing.
yeah, the timing of that was fortunate. And when we got into it, all these endpoints, just think of people, sports clips, pizza places, people that have a lot of locations, and software began to dominate, cloud-based POS software, online ordering, loyalty, and those kinds of things. And that sparked my interest in what Big Leaf was doing, because they solved the connectivity problem for those endpoints. And I happened to be joining their board of directors. And so the business was not necessarily positioned exactly right to go service that part of the market. They lacked a wireless element, a 5G element, and a more efficient, faster path to market. And so, we started working in the first quarter of 2023 toward executing a strategy that takes us into Starlink, 5G, and then and into that realm. And so in January we launched our 800 series router, which has dual radios and does 5G connections, and then we're certified that router is certified on all three major wireless carriers, which we just wrapped up this week. So through podcast, and so this business traditionally sold to customers that had 3, 4, and 5 sites.
That's right. Yeah.
And so as we start to shift and sort of engage on some of the things we're talking about today, Lori has started to run these podcasts. And as we're running these podcasts, we're getting engaged with customers that have 3,000, and these are people that these are businesses that you've heard of, that have 2,000, 3,000 sites, and they're totally digging our value prop and our time to market. So I've gone from, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and sort of do a turnaround on a business and get it to profitability and thread the needle of, we were an SVB customer when I got here, which we fortunately got out of early on, although I don't think that was that big of a deal. It was stressful, but I'm going to go operate this thing into a better place, and then find someone to run the business, sell the business, whatever it may be. And that's kind of turned into, I think we have a game-changing product here that could do a lot of good for a lot of people for a long time, in terms of giving, distribution endpoints access to the economies that are available to them in the cloud, and access to running their business in a more efficient way, and access to a broader market and those kind of things. So I'm stoked about where we are, and mainly driven by the topics that we're talking about today. I think sorting this out, figuring this out, and gaining velocity in this new world, in this platform-driven world, is very cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Greg, thank you again for coming on. For folks that want to get in touch with you or Bigleaf Networks, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, I'm easy to find. I'm on our website, bigleaf.net. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email address is gdavis@bigleaf.net.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thanks again so much for taking the time to join us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Nice to meet you.
Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.